Thank you so much for coming in this afternoon, and it is our pleasure to be your destination speakers throughout your voyage through the Panama Canal and all the way up the Pacific coast to Los Angeles, California. We will be doing destination talks along the way. We'll do one on Panama as we're transiting the canal. And also, if you have any information on Panama, Diane and I have been through it over 20 times. In fact, I'll tell you something that is quite unique for us. It's a pleasure being back on this particular ship because you've all heard of Y2K when it happened. This was the first ship to go through the Panama Canal on Y2K, January 1st, 2000. And everybody, you know, all they said, oh, everything that was going to happen then. Well, we went through smoothly. Also on that date, it changed hands between the United States and Panamanian control. So we went through and we made it through just fine. But this was the first ship to go through the canal on that date. We'll be doing talks on Costa Rica, Guatemala, all the way up to Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas as we head up toward Los Angeles. So it is our pleasure. I'll let us get started with Cartagena, Colombia. Oh, give you a little bit of background for the two of us before we get started. A little bit of background. Both Diane and myself are geography professors in Southern California, and we've been around the world and doing lectures throughout the world. We've already met a few people out here who we've lectured on Alaska. So thank you all for coming, and let's get started.
Well, welcome to our program today. Thinking of Colombia, this is the land of El Dorado and the flamboyant adventurers in search of that ever-elusive gold here. Colombia is named after that great explorer, Christopher Columbus. Here's the town. Here's the statue of Christopher Columbus right in Cartagena. You know, the Spanish ruled Colombia for almost 300 years, and throughout Colombia, the Spanish Empire's influence in the New World is evident. Colombia has an exotic mix of cultures and traditions, including 40 tribal languages, African influences, and the daring conquest of the pirates and the European influence. Colombia was originally populated by the Chibchas natives who lived in the mountains of Colombia long before the Americas were discovered. The Chibchas were an advanced civilization and are now referred to as pre-Columbian. They were excellent goldsmiths and skilled in weaving and pottery. But unfortunately, this was their downfall since the explorers plundered the Chibchas for their emeralds and their gold. So Colombia is the land of El Dorado.
Well, let's look at just exactly where Colombia is. As you can see, it's up there at the top of South America, right next to Venezuela, Ecuador and Peru to the south, and Brazil to the east, and Panama right there, adjacent to it, right off in the upper western area of Colombia. Now, where we'll be on the Caribbean side up there, and then we'll transit the canal, and we'll be out in the Pacific Ocean. Notice that Colombia is not only on the Caribbean side or the Atlantic side, but it's also on the Pacific side. So it goes to both oceans, both sides is where it is. Let's get a little bit closer and show you right exactly where Cartagena is. There you can see Cartagena. So when we leave Cartagena, we really don't have that far to go till we get to Colón, which is in Panama. So it's a rather short journey across that region to get to Panama. Bogota is the capital, and you know, it's up in the mountains. And you're probably wondering, well, why isn't it on the coast? Why did they put the capital way up high? Well, if you're in Cartagena, the temperature is going to be really hot and really humid. It just gets that way where it's at. Up in Bogota, it's very pleasant. It's a nice temperature because you're up high in altitude. A lot of the capitals along the way in Central America will be the same. I mean, when you go to San Jose, Costa Rica. It's going to be up at a higher altitude. It's much cooler than where we dock along the coast in Costa Rica. The same in Mexico. Mexico City's up at a very high altitude, much cooler than along the coast.
Colombia is the fourth largest country in South America. It's about the size of California and Texas combined. Has snow-covered mountain peaks 19,000 feet high in the Andes, and then it goes down to the equatorial jungles and the deserts and the beaches on two oceans, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. So Colombia is quite diverse. About 49 million people live in Colombia. Well, here's Cartagena, and this is the place to see tomorrow. I want everyone to get out and go into the old city. They've done such a wonderful job of restoring the old city, the colorful balconies, the colorful buildings. A wonderful place, and we're docked fairly close to the old city.
Right there where you see, right in the foreground there, that's the clock tower, and that is the main gate into the walled city. But you may be coming in other entrances depending on where they let you off. But that is the main gate into the walled city.
The historic old city is completely surrounded by a 12-foot high wall, which took 194 years to complete. So Cartagena itself was founded in 1533 by Don Pedro de Heredia, and throughout the 16th century, Spain governed this country, this city right in this area. So when the Spanish discovered that the interior of Colombia was rich in gold and emeralds, they forced the natives, Indians, to unearth all the emeralds and gold and give it to Spain. The Spanish seized all the Chibcha Indians' treasures they could find. For almost 300 years, Spain governed Colombia. Then in the early 1800s, a movement for independence from Spain with the help of a very famous man, Simón Bolívar. He was known as the George Washington of South America. Simón Bolívar helped win independence for Colombia, Venezuela, Panama, Peru, and Bolivia. So Colombia gained its independence from Spain in 1819, and the new nation was called Gran Colombia until 1830. And at that time, Gran Colombia included Venezuela, Ecuador, Panama, and Colombia. And then in 1830, Venezuela and Ecuador withdrew from Gran Colombia, and Panama did so in 1903. Here's the flag. 3 horizontal stripes, yellow, blue, and red. The yellow symbolizes Colombia's wealth and resources. The blue represents the two oceans. It's the only country in South America that has both an Atlantic and Pacific coastline. And then the red is tribute to the patriots who fought for freedom from Spain. Here's the people here. Colombia ranks second in population among countries in South America. Only Brazil has more people. Brazil has about 200 million, where Colombia has about 49 million. Cartagena has about 1 million population. Today, Colombia traces its roots to 3 different continents. Number 1, the population includes a small percentage of native Indian groups, some of who have maintained their traditional lifestyles, and there are about 400 different Indian tribes in the country now. And 2, there are some direct descendants of Africans brought to South America as slaves. And then number 3, they find their ancestry in the white Europeans, mostly the Spanish who colonized the land. But by far today, the greatest percentage of Colombia's population are of mixed heritage. But despite their different backgrounds, they are unified by their religion. 95% of the Colombians have one thing in common. They are Roman Catholics. You'll see several churches as you walk around the old city. The Spanish language is also another strong unifying force in Colombia. While most people are united in religion and language, they are deeply divided, though, by income and education levels. A small fraction are wealthy. 1/5 earn a comfortable living. About 1/2 of Colombia's people fall into the category working poor. They have jobs that barely make enough to get by, and 1/4 are extremely poor. Education is free and compulsory for primary education. Although many schools are private and boys and girls often attend separate schools, here you see the girls here in their uniforms. You'll see the kids in uniforms throughout Columbia. They do have secondary schools and vocational schools are found in the major cities. There are several universities here also. But their literacy rate is doing better. I have to say 20 years ago I was saying it was around 80%, but now they're saying it's around 93% literacy rate here in Columbia, so they're doing much better with their education system.
Now this is an overview of the walled city, and you can see the walled city kind of goes all around in this region right here. And you're probably wondering where we'll be docking. We're kind of docking right up in the upper right-hand corner there where you see. So it's a ways, but not too far, into the old walled city. This is the walled city. We're going to be talking about their main fort, which is up here, and then on the mountain also a little bit later. But it kind of gives you an overview of how we go in. And a lot of times you come into the walled city, and then they'll take you around all the historic areas inside the walled city.
I really recommend tours here. It's an excellent tour and they take you everywhere around the city. But it's a little confusing if you go out and do it on your own. There's so many taxi cab drivers and they're yelling and screaming and there's quite a lot of interaction there at the port. So I really do recommend some type of tour here.
Some people take taxis. You can go out and negotiate. Now remember, you go out through the gate, you'll leave the cruise ship and then you'll walk out through kind of a little gift shop, and then you'll go out and the taxis will be waiting for you. So some of you that want to go, but make sure you go down inside the walled city. They have like a lot of security around inside the walled city.
Cartagena was one of the most important cities in the New World in the 16th and 17th centuries, and Cartagena was used as a storage holding area for the gold and the treasures to be taken back to Spain. So it's one of the oldest cities in the Western Hemisphere. It was one of the first cities founded by the Spanish in 1533, and it was one of the major cities in the area at the time. Cartagena gained fame when the great Spanish fleet stopped here annually to take on gold and other products from South America for shipment to Spain. As Colombia's major port, it was here that the treasures were stored until they could be loaded into Spanish galleons for transport to Spain. There were so many ships at that time carrying treasures to Spain, this route became known as the Spanish Main.
Spanish Main. What they did, Pizarro, it was Cortez. You'll be up in Mexico. Cortez conquered the Aztecs. Well, it was Pizarro down in South America that conquered the Incas. And so all of their treasures that they wanted to take back to Spain, they had to find an area. So some of them brought the treasures up on the Pacific side, hiked across the Isthmus of Panama, and then loaded it on, brought it to Cartagena, and then from Cartagena took all of these treasures back to the mother country, which was Spain. They took everything they could get of value and kind of depleted this area.
As we sail in, you're going to see several forts out in the harbor. Although the harbor was guarded by 29 stone forts, and the city was encircled by a high wall, Cartagena still did suffer many invasions. Today, Cartagena is Colombia's 5th largest city, population about 1 million. It's also the leading port today for oil. The oil pipeline from the Magdalena River Valley comes right into Cartagena. So Cartagena built a big oil refinery. So oil is now Colombia's #1 export.
Here's another picture of that massive wall that you'll be seeing inside the walled city. Now, Diane mentioned oil. Oil is big here, and it is refined here, and then it is shipped. You also know that it's neighbored to the east. Venezuela has a lot of oil reserves also. So that they're rich in oil down here. Now, she mentioned something else that probably all of you know is famous from Colombia, and that is coffee. Yeah.
So chief #1 port is oil, but along with platinum and coffee, which are very important exports also. And then you also have coal and gold are exported. But then you also have 95% of the emeralds in the world are found here in Colombia.
We're going to talk about the emeralds a little bit later in our lecture. Now, these are the outlying forts that you see here. And you're going to see them all around as we sail in and out of Cartagena. There's one narrow point when you come into the inner bay, the inner harbor. You come in there, and before we dock the ship, and as you pass, there's one fort on one side, on the starboard side, and there's a fort also on the port side. So these two forts were right there. Now, pirates love to come here, and we're going to talk about pirates. But what they did between these two forts, they put a metal cable across between the two. So if somebody tried to get into the inner harbor, what would that ship do? It would run into that cable and get a, hole in the hull and start to flood. So they had a cable across there to protect the inner harbor. Then what they do is they would take it and put it back when the Spanish ships would leave. But when they weren't there, they put that cable across to keep the pirates out.
So because the city's riches were a tempting target for pirates, the city did build many, many forts. And their greatest one is right in the city here. Cartagena was fortified to defend the country from attacks by English and Dutch pirates who coveted the gold before being shipped to Spain. And these pirates made their living raiding ships that carried gold from South America to Spain. But this is the mightiest of Cartagena's fortresses, and to me, I think this is the biggest fort in Caribbean area. I love the one in San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's a great one, El Moro, but this one is really massive.
It's probably the largest fort that I have ever seen anywhere in the world. We've traveled to a lot of places, but this particular fort, San Felipe.
So many of the tours will stop there. Some will stop for pictures. Some may go inside the fort. But the mightiest of Cartagena's fortresses is San Felipe Fort. The huge fort, San Felipe, was the greatest and strongest of the forts, towering over the city. It's located 135 feet above sea level. It's not located right on the water. It's above sea level and located right in the heart of Cartagena. Construction on San Felipe began in 1536, and it took 121 years to complete. The result is considered to be the most outstanding feat of Spanish military engineering in South America. There are many tunnels and secret passageways, dungeons.
Now look at this. It was really amazing because they had walkways across, and they'll take you across. Well, what they were, as you would be attacking this fort, they had these bridges that you'd run across. Well, you can see all of this is made out of stone. Well, these bridges were wood, and they were like drawbridges. And so as these people were starting to invade the city, as they were coming across, as they get maybe 50 or 100 people on one of these drawbridges, they'd let the floor out from underneath it. They just let it fall down. And then at the bottom, after they fell about 50 to 100 feet, they had all of these spears sticking up in the air. So that was one way of stopping people. Also notice right here, as you enter, inside, there were all of these tunnels inside. Okay, let's say you're outside and you want to go inside to attack the inner parts of the fort. Well, they would wait right inside as you'd enter in to these tunnels. And as you would come in, the first thing you come into is you come in utter darkness. What happens to your eyes all of a sudden? They're not ready for it yet. People were just slaughtered as they would come into these tunnels because they would wait inside, and then they would, kill the enemy or whatever they had to do to pretend or to protect their fort. And there's the view of that mighty fort again.
So right next to the fort, they have a nice statue of Don Blas. In 1741, England attacked Cartagena with a force of 24,000 men and 186 ships. Cartagena defended itself under the command of Don Blas de Lezo. But there is one man who stands out in Cartagena's colorful 500-year history. It is Don Blas. Don Blas had many misfortunes, but continued his courage. He was born in Spain. At 16, a young officer, he lost his left leg in battle. Later, in another battle, he lost his right eye. He continued in service. In the Battle of Barcelona, he lost his right arm. He continued as commander. Courage made him a legend. At the Battle of Cartagena against the British was very tough, and using 500 Spanish soldiers and 2,500 slaves and Indians, he defeated the British. But as a result of the leg wound in his battle, Don Blas died shortly after the withdrawal of the British fleet. His spirit represents the best of Cartagena's colonial traditions. So you'll see his statue right out in front of the fortress.
And there you can see his leg, just peg leg, and he's holding the sword in his left arm.
Another statue here is the Old Shoes, and they always stop for a picture here. The monument of the Old Shoes lies by the roadside in Cartagena in memory of a local poet, Luis Carlos Lopez. Well, let's look at this walled city that you're going to be walking into. It's so beautiful inside. They've restored it. The colorful buildings, the beautiful balconies. King Felipe II of Spain ordered a protective wall around the city. Because the city's riches were a tempting target for pirates, the Spanish built this massive limestone wall around the city. The historic old city of Cartagena is completely surrounded by a 12-foot-high wall, all of limestone. It took 194 years to complete, and the wall cost Spain about 59 million ounces of gold. It's 7 miles long, and in some places it's even 50 feet thick. The main entrance to the old city is at the clock tower, and that's where a lot of you will be walking through. So like I said, Cartagena is one of the oldest cities in the Western Hemisphere. As you walk in, you'll see several churches. Here's one of the churches here. Church of San Pedro Claver, completed in 1603, stands as a shrine to the Spanish noble who devoted his life to caring for the sick and aging. Some other churches around. The beautiful buildings. These are the yellow dungeons. In the walled city is located Las Olvidas, or the dungeons. 23 vaults with their impressive porticos of 47 arches. We look going here, there's a lot of shopping here. There's a lot of little souvenirs to buy in this area. But today it's a very colorful area, used as a shopping and handicraft center. You'll see ladies walking around with their fruit on their heads, with their colorful outfits on, all the watermelons.
And when they post it, they want you to, give them $1 or something for the picture or something like that. But they are there, and it's a very colorful picture to take, how she carries that around. And yes, you can buy fruit from her also. She's carrying a bunch around.
Tablecloths, they have a lot of nice things to buy here. And you always bargain, of course. But look at the buildings here. For a glimpse of colonial Spain, take a look into the 16th century walled city. When visitors visiting this old city, they're stunned by the beautiful examples of Spanish colonial architecture, and this area is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Some buildings are in their original condition, but many have been restored now. They have the barrel tile roofs, they have the bay windows, the second floor balconies, very colorful.
These are the buses, and these it's kind of like the street, and they have very colorful buses as you go around. Painting, they have the painting on their buses. It's kind of unique. So I took a couple pictures of the different buses around as you go around the city.
Now, some of you will also take the tour where you'll go to the old Cartagena, and then you'll also go up to the Popa Monastery. It's way up on the highest hill in Cartagena, and it's the site of an ancient Spanish monastery. La Popa's history is filled with legends of miracles, witchcraft, and even devil worship. But from this summit, you have a great view of the whole city. Very breathtaking view. Inside, you can go inside. Here's the view of the city from the Popa Monastery. Pirates up there, taking pictures.
You can take a picture of it, but there are pirates around there. We're going to tell you about the history of the pirates coming into this region.
A pirate is a person who attacks and robs ships. And Cartagena's harbor was a haven for pirates. Cartagena's harbor was used to take the gold back to Spain. So during the 1500s, competition between Spain and other European countries to colonize the newly discovered Americas led to an outbreak of piracy. So by 1550, Spain controlled the West Indies and large areas of South America's mainland. As a result, bands of English, Dutch, French pirates robbed Spanish ships and looted its settlements. They raided the Spanish ships filled with gold and soon became known as buccaneers. Their numbers grew and eventually no town was safe along the Spanish Main, an area that included the coast of what are now Colombia and Venezuela. One of the most famous pirates was Henry Morgan, another Blackbeard, and another one, Sir Francis Drake. The most popular pirate flag showed a white skull and crossbones on a black background, and this symbol became known as the Jolly Roger. They seized the trading ships by first maneuvering their vessel next to the ship, and they boarded by using hooks and ropes to keep the ships together. So when the Spanish conquistadors discovered that the interior of Colombia was rich in gold and emeralds, these items flowed into Cartagena's harbor for shipment to Spain. So to defend against pirates, King Felipe II of Spain ordered that protective wall to be built around the city. But despite the king's efforts, Cartagena was victim to 5 sieges during the 16th century. There's that big wall. The most famous siege was led by Sir Francis Drake. Sir Francis Drake was born in 1540, died in 1596. He was an English navigator and admiral. He was the first Englishman to circumnavigate the world from 1577 to 1580. But in 1586, Sir Francis Drake made it into the Cartagena harbor. He captured a ship in Cartagena's harbor, threatening to burn the city, but he accepted a $10 million peso ransom for not burning the city. Well, his voyages brought him fame and wealth, and he commanded the seas for many years. He died in 1596 of dysentery and was buried at sea. You'll see a lot of Colombian art, pre-Columbian art. There's a lot of copies of it too. You can pick up a piece, at different places. But all these are in the museums, of course. So some of Colombia's art is ancient. The term pre-Columbian refers to the days before the Europeans came to the Americas, before 1500 though. So ancient ceramic objects have been found all over Colombia. Some date from 3500 BC. Indian potters made both practical and ceremonial items. They represented animals, monsters, and humans. Some believe that they had religious meanings. Many pieces are in the museums, but today you can find many copies of pre-Columbian art and take it home as a souvenir. I think this is the one we got. John liked that, the tongue sticking out. Music and dancing. Some of you will see a little show in the town there. Some of the tours take you and you see a folkloric show, and sometimes they greet us there at the port with beautiful costumes like this. Spanish and African traditions are represented to Colombia's musical heritage. Even though they are different, the dance and the rhythm are similar to the musical beat of the Caribbean islands and Central America. Musical instruments include the marimba, a type of xylophone, drums, maracas. The Colombian people love to dance, so you'll see a lot of different things going on. There's some pretty dancers there too. And coffee. Colombia is known for its coffee, isn't it, John?
Oh, yeah, you've all heard of Juan Valdez, haven't you? You go up there and pick these coffee beans. It's supposed to be the best coffee in the world. When we do a talk on Costa Rica, I'll tell you a good story about Juan Valdez. So get ready to come to the Costa Rica.
The Andes Mountains of Colombia, with their mild temperatures, their fertile soil, and their heavy rainfall, are ideal for the cultivation of the rich, most flavorful Colombian coffee. The final key ingredients are the patient Colombian small farmers, like Juan Valdez. They represent more than 300,000 small owner growers and who individually cultivate each coffee tree. And you'll see them selling coffee up there too. There's the coffee beans. The average coffee plantation has less than 8 acres. and it gives work to a whole family. So when the berries begin to ripen and turn that bright red color, they must be harvested by hand. So on a given branch, they ripen at different times, so they must carefully hand-pick the red ones and take the berries. They process them in the traditional manner. An experienced picker can harvest some 200 pounds of berries a day. No machine can replace the eye and the hand of the coffee farmer. So it's important to get all the red beans. A lot of times if they use a machine, you're going to get a lot of green beans in there with it. Usually 3 generations of families are required to give every tree, every berry, and every bean that care, which makes your morning cup of coffee so delicious. The unending cycle of Colombian coffee growing begins with the finest and the fertile beans at the plantation. The berries are depulped and then soaked in water. They are spread out to dry. Then they rake them. So Colombia's economy depends heavily on coffee as its main agricultural crop. It's the second largest export. Like I said, oil is number 1. Number 2 is coffee. So coffee makes for a great souvenir to take home too. And we have the emeralds here. Look at the emeralds. This is kind of the raw emerald when you find it in a rock or something. Colombia is the emerald capital of the world. Colombia is the world's major source of emeralds. It continues to be the world's leading producer of emeralds, accounting for about 95% of all emerald production. So it's known for its brilliant emeralds. Some people believe that these gems possess magical powers. For example, emeralds are supposed to cancel magic spells, reveal the truth, promote good health, and make a person more intelligent. So maybe we can all use some of that. Good health is great. Being more smart, maybe we'll get on Jeopardy. The emerald is the anniversary stone for people married 55 years. It's the birthstone for people born in May. Good emeralds combine brilliant green color with a beautiful sparkle. The emerald is a member of the beryl family, and the emerald's soft green color is caused by traces of chromium. Even in its unfaceted or natural form, the emerald crystal can be quite attractive and serve for less expensive pieces of jewelry. So they do have the raw emeralds that aren't, they're a little bit different, but you can buy those too there. There's a lot of different types of emeralds. But when choosing faceted stones, it's important to consider the color, the brilliance, and the clarity. The best color is an intense medium dark Moen grass green. It should be even in color across the whole stone. The brilliance or sparkle of the stone is important. The clarity of the stone also increases its value dramatically. So they have a lot of emeralds here in Colombia. Other things, little handicrafts that I like to buy. I like to get things like this, and our house is filled with stuff I can't buy anymore. Weaving is another of Colombia's arts. The country's climate produces many different kinds of fibers, and Colombian weaving was well developed before the arrival of the Spanish, but however the Spanish introduced sheep, which added wool to the range of materials for weaving. So you'll see a lot of nice wall hangings and things like that here. You'll also see the popular woolen cloak. They call it the ruana, with a hole in the middle, kind of like a poncho. And a lot of people wear those around the town too.
And a lot of vegetation around here. It's really tropical. And so you're going to find ginger. I mean, you're going to find all kinds of plants that you only find in warm climates. The hibiscus here.
Colombia covers less than 1% of the Earth's surface, but it contains 15% of all known living species. There are 55,000 species of plants here. The ginger, the bougainvillea, hibiscus, lots of nice flowers here. And then the birds. Oh my gosh, the birds. These are the scarlet macaws, and 1,700 species of birds found in Colombia. They include the macaw. They have the red one and the blue one. And don't miss it at the port. John will be talking about that later. Macaws are long-tailed parrots that live in forested areas of South America and Central America. Macaws are one of the largest parrots. These birds have the long pointed wings and heavy, powerful bill. Beautifully colored feathers of blue, red, yellow, and green cover the body. They often can be seen flying swiftly in pairs over tropical rainforests, and they nest in holes in tall trees. They eat nuts, seeds, and fruit.
Now, Diane mentioned, if you want to, it was here last year, so hopefully it'll be here again. As you exit the ship and you set out of the port, there's a gift shop right there where they're selling coffee and a lot of jewelry and different things. Right as you're going out to get the taxis, or right where the gate is between the port and the city. If you go behind the gift shop, one of our favorite things to do is go back there. As you can see, there's Diane, and you can get up close and personal to all of these animals and birds that you'll see here. There's a sloth there. There's some monkeys back in there. So if you're on tour, the tour bus will probably pick you up near the ship, and then you'll go out on tour, and then you'll come back to the ship. Get off that bus and walk out to just before you go back out, where the gate is to get into the port area. Go through the gift shop and go behind the gift shop. And back in there is kind of a little mini zoo, and it's well worth taking time to go to. So just remember that, and go see some of these animals that are unique to this region of the world.
Here you have the toucan, a beautiful bird, unusual looking bird with an enormously brilliantly colored bill. You'll get close like this to those two right there. Toucans live in the tropical and subtropical forests of Central America and South America. The toucan's huge bill looks heavy, but it actually weighs little because it contains a number of air pockets inside that bill. So like I said, in the terminal there they have cages with birds. This is the Andean condor. The Andean condor is the nation's symbol of, it's their national symbol actually. And it appears on the country's coins, currency, and even its national brands of beer. You have the Andean condor in there.
It is the largest flying bird in the world, right here in Colombia. It's along the Andes Mountains, which is kind of a chain of mountains in South America. Now there is the second largest flying bird, and that's found in the United States in California. It's called the California condor, but they're like cousins. This one is actually the largest one that you'll see here in South America. Now Diane mentioned that you have the well, there it is. Look at the wingspan on that thing. It can get up and it can just glide in all of those currents that you have up there, the thermal, and just go for miles. It's like a vulture though. And that's one of the problems for this bird. Being a vulture is it'll go down and eat or something that has died. So when it goes down, a lot of times what's died has been poisoned. So what happens? If you eat that, pretty soon you ingest enough poison. So this is a very endangered species on our planet, just like in California.
So the Andean condor is the largest flying bird, about 4 feet long, wingspan 9 to 10 feet. Once common along the entire length of the three belts of the Andes, the condor is now found only on one peak at the northern extreme of Colombia. Steep terrain and high mountain peaks make up condor country. The Andean condor has black plumage with white wing patches and a white neck ruff. The male has a comb and wattles. So they are classified as endangered. The Andean condor is truly on the edge of extinction. Since 1989, Andean condors have been hatched and reared in captivity and then released into the remote regions of the Colombian Andes. So like John said, they're found in the Andes and also there's California condor in Southern California. But they are trying to release them and get them back into the wild.
And there's some of their currency, and you can see the condor right on their currency.
You won't need Colombian currency. They all take dollars. And I recommend everybody take small bills if you're going to be buying little souvenirs and things like that. And like I said, you bargain too. So if they say $10, you might say $4 and then $5 or $6. Have an extra dollar in and $5, okay, make it $6 or something like that. But they do bargain.
Yeah, Diane made a very good point, and I would just like to tell you, if you go off with all 20s, and all of a sudden you see something you want, you don't want all of the Colombian money and change back. So try to go off with some 1s and 5s. Then you can negotiate. Try to negotiate, because then, like Diane said, one of my favorite things to do is, if you see something you want, one of my favorite things is start to walk away. And if they follow you, you're close to meeting a common prize. If they just let you go, then you know you're not even close. But then, if they follow you, you might throw in $1 more, and that'll close the deal. So just remember that. This is basically a bargaining with some of the people, on the streets, like for a t-shirt or something like that. But just remember, down here, bargain, bargain, bargain. Get used to it. Sometimes it's fun. And you build a relationship. Kind of just go in and give them money, and you're out the door. This way, you kind of smile at each other and, a little bit. I know a lot of people don't like doing it, but it is fun if you get used to doing it. And there's their currency again. Now this is the sloth. And they are, you probably slow as a sloth. It's true. They're very slow moving. Their metabolism is extremely slow. I mean, they don't have to eat too much to survive. And they'll sleep. And there's 2 types of sloths. There's the 2-toed and the 3-toed sloth. You're going to see them in Colombia, and you'll also see them in Costa Rica as we go along on the voyage. But they stay in trees, and they can hang on to branches as they're sleeping, because these claws just can kind of dig in there. The only time that they ever come down to the ground is when they have to eliminate. So that's the only time. The rest of the time, they're up in trees somewhere. So hopefully you'll see some sloths. Sometimes there's people around as you tour around the old walled city. There's a man, and there's Diane with her chance, and their hair is kind of like pig's hair. It's really coarse. And anyway, you can go and maybe get your picture. Like I said, he also wants you to give him a tip or something for the picture with the sloth.
That was a 3-toed sloth. These strange animals in South America have an odd appearance, though. They're no tail or no ears, and their noses are very blunt. They have peg-like teeth, very slow and peculiar way of moving. And when moving in the trees, they walk upside down, hanging from the branches. So sloths can hang so securely with their hook-like claws that they can even fall asleep in this position. So, like John said, they only come down to eliminate. And they have such a slow metabolism that they don't come down very often. So throughout Colombia, the Spanish Empire's influence in the New World is self-evident. Its fortress walls, quaint narrow streets, and balconied houses are all vivid reminders of Spain's hold on Cartagena, and throughout the Caribbean and South America. So for a glimpse of colonial Spain, take a stroll into the 16th century walled city. I don't want anyone to miss this. It is so beautiful. This is the land of El Dorado and the flamboyant adventurers in search of the ever-elusive gold. Cartagena's well-constructed fortifications defended its borders against seafaring pirates whose attacks lasted for more than 200 years. Today, this modern and bustling city, seaport, and commercial center still boasts much of its original colonial architecture. So enjoy the flavor of old Spain in Colombia and enjoy Cartagena. Thank you very much for coming today.